Good evening and welcome to our next edition or broadcast from Townhead Christian Fellowship. It's hard to believe that we've been doing this for more than a year now. Little did we think when we started up the weekly broadcast that this would be going on for such a long time. But it's good to be back again this evening, and we trust as you hear God's word being preached that you are challenged and possibly encouraged by what you hear as well. Our speaker this evening is Locke from Townhead Christian Fellowship, from our own fellowship, and in a few moments I'll hand over to the clip with Jackie. I would just like to take time to say thank you for those who have been faithfully watching over the last year or so. It's very much appreciated, and if this is your first time, welcome, and we hope that again you are interested in what you hear, and if you are, please get in touch. But more about that later. So let me hand across to Jackie Locke from our own fellowship.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you've all had a good week, and I hope you've managed to fit something into this past week that maybe has been a bit exciting for you, perhaps something out of the ordinary, something fulfilling. I'm thinking of maybe like a trip to the hairdressers or a visit to a garden centre. It's amazing to think that things which were once routine and taken for granted a year ago are now things that are sought after and exciting and valued. I suppose this past year has probably helped us all to stop and think and reflect on the importance, the significance and the value of things that we may have become very familiar with and taken for granted. The verses that I'm going to quote this evening are words that we are possibly all familiar with and take them somewhat for granted. Even if you don't regularly attend church, there's a strong possibility that you've heard these words at a wedding or maybe a funeral, slightly paraphrased often to fit a particular tune. But the verses that I'm going to quote are the 6 verses that comprise Psalm 23. They read like this: "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." The writer of that psalm was a man called David. He started his working life as a shepherd. He became a great soldier and eventually a king. He was king of Israel for 40 years. He was also a very talented musician and poet and songwriter. Psalm 23 that we've just quoted is a song that he wrote around 3,000 years ago. Now that's quite incredible, really, I think. I was in my teens and 20s in the 1970s and 1980s, and I really loved the music from that era. But many songs have lasted the 30 or 40 years or so since then. Well, not really that many, I suppose. Most of them have been long forgotten. If I was to ask you to name songs from 200 to 300 years ago, I don't think the list would be too long. I would imagine for those of us who live here in the west of Scotland, we would at least be able to name some of the songs of Robert Burns. Handel's Messiah, it was written in 1741, and perhaps some of us could name a few pieces from that. But probably not that many from that era. But what about 1,000 years ago? Well, we're really getting stuck there. Even Google wasn't overly helpful in giving much information about the songs that have lasted 1,000 years. But here we have a song that has been around for 3,000 years and we're still familiar with the words. So what is it about this song that has allowed it to stand the test of time and still be so familiar in 2021? Well, if you investigate, you'll find that there are many answers that we don't have time to explore in just the few minutes that we have this evening. The linguists suggest that in its original Hebrew form, it had a wonderful structure and pulse and rhythm. Many theologians suggest that people come to this psalm because it is jam-packed full of detail about the person and the character of God. It reveals him as the shepherd, the provider, the restorer, the righteous one, the one who's with us, the one who is our helper, the one who is victorious. These are just but a few. You can read the psalm yourself and perhaps you'll find some more in the psalm. But isn't it interesting that it's a psalm? It's a song that is commonly sung at weddings, at a time of joy and celebration, but also sung at funerals, a time of deep sadness and loss and mourning. It seems a bit of a paradox to me, doesn't it? Why would you sing the same song at a time of celebration as you would at a time of mourning? Well, if you take time to explore that question, you'll discover that many writers describe it as a psalm for all times, because it deals with and it addresses some of the realities and some of the issues that we all struggle and we all wrestle with. A number of years ago, I was at a function where there were a number of speakers from the world of football. They were mainly professional football players. There was one speaker there who had been a professional player in his youth and he had retired, and at the time he was speaking he was the pastor for Liverpool Football Club. And in his after dinner speech, I recall that he told some stories about his own playing days. He told some stories about some of the very famous players that had played for Liverpool, and then he told us some very poignant things and poignant stories to do with some of the awful tragedies that that particular football club had to deal with. But he then concluded his speech by explaining why he was able to use this psalm, Psalm 23, frequently in his pastoral care of players, of club executives and of supporters of the club. And he described this psalm as a psalm for all seasons, because the psalm held the key to the celebration of life, to comfort in death, and to confidence for life after death. Of the celebration of life, he said, of the words in the psalm, I shall not want. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Comfort in death. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. For confidence for life after death, the psalm concludes, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. But he then reminded us that the key that unlocks the secret of the celebration of life, the comfort in death and the confidence for life after death, is the first line of the psalm. The words that we are all perhaps so very familiar with, yet often lose the significance. The Lord is my shepherd. As David wrote these words, and this was personal for him, he didn't write the Lord is a shepherd, the Lord is a great shepherd, the Lord is an example of a shepherd that have helped me become a shepherd. He didn't say that. He wrote, the Lord is my shepherd. If you take time to read through the Psalms, a collection of songs and poems from 3,000 years ago or so, and many of them written by David. And you'll discover that David writes much about his own personal faith. In Psalm 71 he writes, "In you, O Lord, do I put my trust." In other psalms he describes God as my strength, my rock, my salvation, my refuge. These are just a few examples. There are many more. But the key meaning from this psalm is that the true celebration of life, true comfort in death and confidence for life after death comes from personal faith. The psalm, of course, has another dimension to it because it points to one who would be born around about 1,000 years later. It points to Jesus. And about 1,000 years after this psalm was written, Jesus was described as the one who was the good shepherd. He says in John chapter 10 verse 10, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." Now let me leave you with some verses that show that faith in him is the key to celebration of life, comfort in death, and confidence for life after death. These are the words of Jesus that I leave you with. In John chapter 10 verse 10 he says these words, "I have come that you might have life, and you might have it in all its fullness." John chapter 11 verse 25 Jesus says, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live, and everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." Again, he says in John chapter 3 verse 16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." The Lord is my shepherd, a familiar phrase, but the key to celebration in life, comfort in death, and confidence for life after death. Words that we are so familiar with, but I wonder if we do capture and realise the significance and the value of the meaning of these words. The Lord is my shepherd.
Thanks for that, Jackie. In a moment we're going to hear Sophie, Sarah and Jennifer sing "The Lord's My Shepherd" from Psalm 23. I just thought it'd be a good point to just say thanks to all of the individuals involved in TCF who have put these musical videos together. I think we've only repeated ourselves a couple of times over the year, and there's an incredible amount of work that goes into putting these clips together, and I think the whole church would just like to say thank you for all of the efforts, for everyone involved, for putting these hymns, which are very much appreciated, together as well. So without further ado, let me hand you over across to Sarah, Sophie and Jennifer. Thanks.
In green pastures he makes me
Well, thanks for listening again this evening. We hope that you have enjoyed what you've heard. If there's anything been said or sung that you're interested in or you want to hear more, please get in touch, and you can do that very easily through either our Facebook page and just message us, or you can go onto our website and email us through the website as well. So thanks again, and God bless as we enter a new week. Thanks.